Hello, welcome to Literally Speaking. My name is Jennifer Spofford, and with me today is Rick Davidson, the one and only. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, in the glorious Mulford Room at Freiburg Public Library.
It is a glorious room, actually.
Pretty rich with history here. So, tell us about your newest book before we get into what you have recently started. Your newest book is?
Well, my newest book is called Catamount Unleashed. It's the third I guess you could call it a series, although I think all three books can exist independently of each other. I kind of have to go back to my first book because it was about a mountain lion in northern New Hampshire.
Oh.
That does start to cause problems, both with the animal population and eventually with people.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes, and you know, there's been sightings of mountain lions, and it's always been such a hush hush. And you know, the Forest Service denies their existence here in New Hampshire and Maine, the area. So
that's correct. And basically, actually, I have a list of quite a number of people who have claimed to see mountain lions, and actually have a slideshow that I do on mountain lion sightings in New England. And generally there are people that come in and want to share their stories. But the way this got started actually was when I had a photo shop in Conway for many years, and my manager was from Brownfield. And she and her brother grew up in Brownfield, and they talked about seeing a mountain lion that used to sun itself on their property. And a number of my friends claimed to have seen him. So when I was trying to think of something that I could put into the North Country, which is my favorite area, one of my favorite areas in New England, was what could be up there, but you know, I didn't want to do Bigfoot or anything like that. I wanted something
which would be interesting, though, but
still, be another
yeah.
story.
Yeah.
But it's I wanted it to be something that could be there but shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. And so essentially, the first book does deal with what happens when a mountain lion appears, mm-hmm. and the third book basically draws it all together, really, and explains how that mountain lion might have gotten there. This isn't your typical mountain lion.
Oh, wow, okay. So is it a little is it like a little supernatural, maybe, or?
The original book sort of leans towards that. It's interpretive. I've been always very, very interested in a legend that is in the North Country about Metallic, who was an Indian who lived to be a very old age, or a Native American.
Oh, wow.
His grave is in that area, is still there. And there's a story that goes along with him that is a part very much of all three books to some degree, but very much so in Catamount, and eventually in the third book, which is Catamount Unleashed.
Oh, wow, okay.
And there's some resolution to that part of it, too, in book 3.
Oh. So you told us what inspired. It's a series, but you could read them alone, on their own.
You could.
Like you said.
Mm-hmm.
So what inspired you to start writing about this particular experience, or the mountain lion sightings? And
I think it's something that just kind of exists in your mind. A number of years ago, I did work on a couple of films, and they were films, not video, that really didn't go very far, but I was hired as a still photographer and got the bug a little bit.
Yeah.
So the original version of Catamount was actually a screenplay.
Oh, interesting.
And I actually did get involved with doing eventually a lot of video, and especially in the fly fishing area. My friend Bill Thompson, who he and his wife ran North Country Angler for many years.
Yep.
And basically we did a number of fly fishing videos together. But the idea of making Catamount was just a little bit too much for the kind of funding that I had. So it got put aside. And a friend of mine, number of years later, probably as many as 10, decided to write some books about pirates. So we decided, okay, well, let's write together.
Yeah.
Not the
like
books
a partnership,
together,
but
not
just
a partnership,
okay.
but that we would share the experience on, on a pretty much daily basis.
So you could be supportive towards each other, I'm sure.
That's exactly right, and it was very beneficial, I think, for both of us. So I basically went back to the screenplay, and then filled it out with the book. I haven't done that since because I kind of like the books to unfold, rather than to have an outline. But it was handy in that first book to have a screenplay, which really is an outline.
Yeah, absolutely.
As much as anything.
Yeah, I mean, it goes the other way around a lot of times. There's books that turn into movies, or they end up into screenplay or scripts. That's very interesting that it started as a screenplay.
It did.
And I was going to say, what took you to this genre, the mystery sort of thriller genre?
I've always been a fan of mysteries and thrillers, various different types. Certainly some of it is from movies as well. I mean, I think one of my biggest influences was Hitchcock's The Birds.
Oh, yeah.
I just loved the way that movie, and I tried to do the same thing in the books, was how normalcy sort of begins at the beginning and very slowly but surely, it just gets, there's more and more things happening, and obviously the birds get more and more dangerous.
Yeah.
And basically the same thing happens with Catamount and the mountain lion in the first book. And it just has always intrigued me to put also, what if something is there that shouldn't be there?
Yeah.
And the second thing is, that Spielberg talks about this a lot, but I think is to put normal people or ordinary people into an extraordinary situation, and how do you get them out?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so, essentially, I was looking, as I said before, for something I could place in the place, which was the North Country, and yet at the same time would create the conflict that you needed. And the mountain lion was, as I said, it had been sort of, gestating in the back of my head.
Yeah,
so, that's really where that came from. Obviously as a kid I used to read Sherlock Holmes. I was a big Agatha Christie fan.
Yeah.
Peter Robinson, the Inspector Bates movies, not movies but books and films, have always fascinated me. It just was a genre I felt more comfortable with. The other thing is I think storytelling, it evokes emotion, it evokes your senses. So you can say things in a story that engage people more than, say, if I were just to write about mountain lions in the North Country.
Like a nonfiction, right?
Exactly. And there are people who do nonfiction very well, too. But, as my publisher said, he said, I think you really start to sail when the action gets going.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to do these books, I think, should be read as quickly as possible, and most people who read them said they can't put them down. And I'm looking at it a little bit like a TV show that way, that you get into it and you have that whole experience as much as possible in 1 or 2, maybe 3 readings.
Right. I'm reading this now, and this is your second book, and I thought it really did take off, and you could see that it began to snowball into this very exciting, thrilling, and scary sort of event that took place. And I think that does help carry the story along throughout, and you did that in this, and I thought it was very interesting, and it's turning out to be a really fast read for me. So going back to Catamount, how much research did you have to do for that particular book?
Catamount definitely required the most research that I had to do, because I really did want to make sure, although this mountain lion was not exactly typical,
Yeah.
I did want to make sure that it didn't do anything really that a mountain lion wouldn't do. And obviously it would be very, very strange for all of the things that happened in this book to happen at once. But there is nothing in there that a mountain lion hasn't done at some point in time somewhere. It's also interesting that I made a black one. Indeed, they're not black.
No.
They're tawny.
Right.
Sort of a tawny color. But, so yes, quite a bit of research went into what do mountain lions do, where do they go, how do they mate, how much distance can they cover, which is a lot, by the way.
They're territorial, right?
Territorial.
So,
Yeah. So that required quite a bit. Something like Murder, this one, essentially probably less, because it's based on a place actually which is in Maine, up in northwestern Maine, which is a hunting and fishing lodge.
Oh, yes.
And which I've been to.
Yeah.
And it just struck me again, I mean, what if a murder were to take place out there, say in the spring, before you can get in on the logging roads.
Right. And they're so muddy, you have to have like an all-terrain sometimes to get through there.
And in some cases, and various things happen that it's just very impossible to get out or in.
Yep.
So the people who are there, who are some of the characters from the first book, basically are again put into that situation where they're basically normal people, but they got to deal with this.
Right.
Because the body count is starting to
that makes the story, like I said, so fast paced, because you really just want to know like what's going to happen, how is this going to turn out. So yeah, very, very, very good. So do you have a writing schedule, because you do have other professions that you work in, and how difficult is it to stick to a writing schedule?
Well, when I first started Catamount, basically I had my photography business. So there were periods of time, mostly weekends, where I started working on that. Eventually, when the time came to write the book, I was teaching at Kingswood down in Wolfboro for the Governor Wentworth School District. And then again, I would spend the school vacations, Saturdays and Sundays, and yes, it does require that you sit down and take a period of time and do it regularly. Fortunately, now that I am retired from those things, if I get back into the swing of it, so to speak, I really do the 3 to 4 hours every morning. I think the ideal for, a lot of writers will say this, and I think it's to have that period of time in the morning where you're writing, the afternoon where you can pursue other things that you're interested in, and the evening as well, but it lives with you the whole time. Yeah. So oftentimes, if I'm in the writing mode, which unlike, say, a Stephen King, who's in the writing mode all the time, which I envy to some degree. But when I do get into that, I will make sure that I'm doing it. And you can't get up in the morning and look at your email or do anything like that, because you'll get sidetracked.
Right.
You sit down and do it. And, then in the afternoon, I'm very likely to go kayaking or go out on a sailboat with a friend or something, or hike. But the story is churning all those times. And so I do always carry something with me, too, to write down anything that pops into my head. So to answer your question directly, yes, I do have to have a schedule. Right at this very moment, I've had a lot of other things happening in my life, so I'm not. And I am getting, it's an addiction to some degree, so I'm starting to get that.
That's a good addiction to have, I guess, writing.
If I don't start feeding this pretty soon, I'm not going to be happy.
Wow, yeah. So do you ever do you start books and kind of let them stew for a little bit and then go back to them? Or are you seem very disciplined, so you probably have your my goal is to finish this book, and then
So far, it's been pretty much one thing after another.
yeah.
And to be pretty much involved with the one that I'm dealing with. Every once in a while, something will pop into my head for like a short story or something like that, and I might, write that in before I forget it and get it out. But so far as publications and getting published, working with my publishers, we have not done any kind of a short story anthology yet.
Oh, okay.
And I think we're still looking at, as I said earlier to you, what I had kind of envisioned as being a short story that would be put online where people could read it, and the idea would be for them to then want to read these other books.
Yep.
And it would just be a short thing that would to get their imagination going. But I'm finding that it's already taking off into a larger project, I think.
Cool, great. So you proofread and you edit your own work, or do you have somebody do that for you?
Oh, thank God I have help with that. I do.
Yeah. That's a big
it's funny.
job.
Just with one of my college friends this morning, I was emailing, and he was talking about a fourth draft that he was on, and actually my fourth, the third book is supposed to be out. Mm-hmm. And I kind of went back and told him, yeah, well, we're on 5+.
Oh, wow, yeah.
But I do, fortunately, having found, I'm not self-published, which helps as far as that goes. Because unfortunately, if you're self-published, you usually have to pay somebody. And with this, I do get, the covers, which I think are very well done.
Yes, and I was going to talk about those covers. They are excellent, yeah.
And I really love this third book cover.
I do too.
And
it's great artwork.
Fortunately, the person who's doing this, it's a small publisher.
Yeah.
But then he had worked in the industry. In today's world, he was able to start his own business. But his wife is an artist, and his son is a graphic artist.
Oh, that's
so
a nice match.
All of these talents. And Brad, it's Beach River Books, by the way, which is in Ossipee, New Hampshire.
Yep.
Brad is a very good editor. I love the way he will make suggestions without, saying, you've got to do this.
Yeah.
But let's discuss this. But I also need to give credit to my wife, who is a great proofreader for typos and for a continuity. She's the one that will go, well, wait a minute, that guy can't be alive, you killed him off.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a major thing to pay attention to, but it's also something that does get sort of forgotten about.
It can.
Yeah, and it can, right.
She has an eagle eye that picks up on things like that. So by the time that Brad gets, the editor gets it, it at least has been gone over a number of times. I wouldn't send a first draft to him. Yeah. So he's probably getting a third or fourth draft. And then he will come back. And it's kind of neat the way you can do it nowadays. You can, with Microsoft Office or whatever, the original is in one form, his comments are in another form, and then my comments are in another form, then the final version comes out in another form.
Yeah, it must be really wonderful to see the progression through the edits that you make.
It is definitely, and there is a progression.
Yeah.
But usually what he will say is, we need to work on the dialogue maybe here, we need to work on something here, but don't change the story. Mm-hmm. So I always feel like the story seems to work by the time we get to that point.
So you mentioned the covers, and I actually was very interested in the covers of your books because the Catamount book, like you said, is a mountain lion that you turned black instead of the fawn color that mountain lions typically are. Is there like some symbolism behind that? You mentioned there was like a Native American sort of maybe legend about it, but I wasn't sure if that had anything to do with that cover.
I'm not sure symbolism would be quite the right word. I just wanted something that did, that the fear factor is there. And I don't know why, but I felt like I had to make it a little bit more surreal than what a mountain lion would really be. Because in reality, mountain lions really don't want anything to do with us. And, you know, there are occasionally reports of somebody who's attacked by a mountain lion, and it does happen. But I just felt that somehow it fit more to be a little bit different. And when you get to Catamount Unleashed, the real reasons start to become clear.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not going to...
Okay. So
the Native American part of it was more of just a fascination with that particular story of what happened to this character, this person who did exist, and what happened when his wife died and how that was dealt with in the winter. And it's a very famous story, really, up in the North Country. There's a mountain named after him. There's an island named after him. There's a place on Lake Umbagog, which is basically named after her. And you know, it's just a story that always captured my imagination. So it became a part of Catamount, sort of a sub-story that goes along with it.
Excellent. So how important is it to have a great cover to sell a book, do you
I think it helps.
Yeah.
You know, people have said that they've been attracted to the cover. I've had people say this one scared them a little.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, I would pick that up and it would seem to me like a scary book, you know, more than a thriller, but...
And we had, this cover took us a number of tries. And because partially what kept coming up was something that looked more like a vampire than a mountain lion, and I didn't want to get on the vampire bandwagon or the zombie bandwagon.
Which is huge. I mean, it's still kind of going too. Yeah. It's going strong.
So it took us quite a while to get something that we liked. I mean, there's a forest fire in this, so that's where the fire comes from. A lot happens in Catamount. This is really all thriller.
Yeah.
When you get right down to it, which was my intent. There's some definite interesting, I think, some things come through about man versus nature and that kind of thing, if you need to, look at thematic types of things.
Yeah.
And the themes sort of evolve. This one does get into some of the issues with drug addiction.
Yeah.
Or drug abuse or use, it's just what they call it now. And that kind of evolves, because the issues are there. And, with some people that are, I know have had issues, and it's sort of, what can happen. Again, it's a what if. And the third book, I would guess is more dystopian in the sense of Hunger Games or something like that. I mean, there's some things going on that, are happening in society that, in my mind, are going to be happening in the book as well.
Excellent, yeah. So how much of yourself do you put in the books? Any sort of juxtapositioning of you and some of your lead characters, or is it?
Well, I think perhaps the fish and game officer I identify with to a certain degree. If I had a profession, if I were young again, knowing what I know now, I might look at pursuing that profession, something along that line, but not 100%, no. The second book actually is written in the first person. So in other words, it's an I book, whereas the other two are not. So basically I suppose what I was trying to do here was to see what it was like to get inside the mind from what that person is thinking. So, you get the feeling of, I'm thinking about this, or this is what that person is saying or thinking, which is different from doing it in third person, which is what most books, or a lot of books, are written. But yes, I'm sure there are things in there, but I guess I would rather let the the reader figure out. Maybe those people who know me
Right.
can try to figure
They
out.
can figure it out and they can say, that's Rick for sure. Excellent, thank you. Any advice you'd like to give to any aspiring writers out there?
Boy, I think the most important thing is first of all to be a reader. I mean, if you don't read, I can't imagine why you don't want to write. You know, Scott over here, for example, I mean, you probably don't get behind a camera if you're not a movie fan, you know. And you know, I've been behind the camera too, and so that's an important part of it, I think, is that you're a fan first of what you're doing. And the second is, absolutely is to just start doing it. I wouldn't want to say it comes from somewhere else, but when you really get going and that story starts flowing, it's almost like it isn't me.
Oh, wow.
And that, you know, and I hesitate to say that, because I don't want to get on any metaphysical thing. But, you know, the fact is, though, if you don't sit down and do it, that doesn't happen.
Right.
And I think, you know, when the years that probably I didn't do this, although I definitely wrote a lot in college, and I had an ongoing photography articles going in newspapers and so on for a while. Though if is that the times that you're not doing it and the idea pops in your head and you let it go, it's a little bit like an inventor, I think, who says, geez, I could have invented that,
right,
but didn't.
Right.
And it's the same thing. I mean, if you sit down and you start writing, I don't think it matters. Some people like to do it longhand. I do know people who want to do it in a traditional typewriter. I personally welcome technology.
Oh, great, yeah.
The computer definitely makes it easier for me.
I was going to say, it might make it a little bit easier for you, right? If you're on a computer, the editing process might be a little easier.
The editing process, for sure. I mean, I'm not the world's greatest typist, so I mean, I love the idea you can go back and fix it. The other thing is that I usually have two computers running. So one of them is, so if I have a question, I can just turn around and go to Google and ask the question, which, by the way, when I did this, Google wasn't as, when I did that original screenplay, Google wasn't there in the same sense. There were few search engines and so on. But, I really had to go get books from a library.
Excellent.
And sit down and read them or buy them so I could mark them all up. But, basically nowadays, if you have a question, you Google it.
Yep,
and you're going to find, and what is great is that you find a lot of different points of view. Without having to, get in your car and drive somewhere.
Sure, yeah.
So technology for me, it is a very big plus. There's absolutely no question about that.
Excellent. So I met some of your family a little bit earlier when they first showed up, and I was just wondering, who's the most supportive out of your family, would you say?
Oh, well, I think they all are. My daughters have all contributed to proofreading at some time or other. I have three girls, and obviously I think depending on their age groups and so on, but I have one grandson who's 16 and has definitely read Catamount, and it's always good to know that they enjoyed them. But I think certainly my wife has been very supportive. She's willing to go, okay, he's going to write for 3 hours today. I'll go find something else to do.
That's always nice.
But, as I said, I mean, when I was a teacher, I was a middle school teacher, and it was very, it was good to know the kids really enjoyed these books. And I didn't really write them, it wasn't like Hunger Games, which was written for teenagers. But I did find that the kids in middle school and high school definitely enjoyed these books. And, that's kind of drifting away from your question, and I apologize.
Oh, it's okay, yeah.
But,
it's nice to know that your fan base is different age groups, different demographics.
Very definitely.
That's a fantastic feeling as an author, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So the first book is Catamount.
First book is Catamount. Actually, it's Catamount, a North Country thriller.
Oh.
We did have to add the North Country thriller because there is another book that was written somewhere about a place in Pennsylvania that was called Catamount.
Oh.
So I don't think legally we had any real issues, but we thought it might be good because people search for these things online.
Yep.
That this had a slightly different title. Murder at Stillwater Lodge. When I had a video business, it was called Stillwater Video.
Oh.
So I've always had that title for some reason. So this, basically, this one I just wanted to do a mystery. I really wanted to do it and say, okay, something happens. Can they figure out who done it? It was a who done it.
Yeah.
There's only so many stories out there.
Yeah, right.
I mean, this one is definitely the, man against nature and, fighting the monster to some degree.
Yeah.
Which is a story that goes all the way back to the Odyssey.
Oh, yes.
And that's interesting, too, because James Joyce's Ulysses is my absolutely favorite book. And it's because I think he sees daily life as what, Odysseus had to go through. But this one, was a murder mystery. I'm really back more into, with Catamount Unleashed, is more getting into, again, the man against...
And that's the third.
The monster or something like that, and that's the third.
Excellent.
And, from here, actually, when the book comes out, then, we have to start looking at ways to, to market it. When this book came out, the bookstores were, there were a number of bookstores that took it and did very well with it, especially in North Country. And a lot of them don't exist anymore.
Oh, right.
Thankfully, some do. But we are finding that we really are finding that we need to market online. These two are also ebooks.
Oh, great.
The third book probably won't be an ebook for a little while because my publisher likes to have a real book out there for a while before we turn it into an ebook.
Yeah.
But in the long run, an ebook is easier to market online because it can be ordered and downloaded, and you can create, what the idea is to create a sort of a mailing list of people who follow you. And I'm slowly but surely building that up, both with my photography and with the books, so that when a book comes out, quite a number of people are aware of it now.
Excellent.
Whereas when this book came out, you really had to.
It was a while ago, right?
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Rick Davidson, for joining me today in the Mulford Room. And I look forward to your third book, and that is The Catamount Unleashed. Excellent. I'm so excited about that. And thank you for joining us again. Please check out our Facebook page, Instagram, and Twitter at Freiburg Library. Thank you very much. Thanks, Rick.
Well, thanks for having me.